This morning's gospel is from John, chapter 4, verses 5 to 42. When someone asked me on Thursday how I was doing, I had today's gospel story on my mind. I'm okay, I said, but I find I'm already thirsty for my normal life and routine and interactions with people, and I know we've only just begun. It was thirst that brought Jesus to Jacob's well that day. He and his disciples had walked from Judea. They were on their way to Galilee, but had to pass through Samaria to get there. They were hot and tired and hungry. The disciples had gone into town to get some food. Jesus was at the well alone. It was around noon, and no one else was at the well. Women would fetch water during the cooler parts of the day, early in the morning or late in the afternoon. It was a social time for them. It made the chore of hauling water more bearable, because they could look forward to the time of fellowship, and yes, sometimes gossip. As Jesus sat at the well, a Samaritan woman approached. She was likely shunned by the community of women who came to the well during the cooler parts of the day. We don't know her name or her story, but we can guess that the fact that she had had 5 husbands and was currently living with a man who wasn't her husband had something to do with her being an outcast. We can also guess she was sometimes the topic of the other women's gossip. Jesus broke through a lot of taboos when he asked her for a drink. In his culture, men didn't speak to women who weren't related to them. Jewish people would have nothing to do with Samaritan people, and they certainly wouldn't share eating or cooking utensils with them because Samaritans didn't keep kosher. Violating any one of these rules would have rendered a Jewish man ritually unclean. But that didn't stop Jesus. He engaged the woman in conversation, and that conversation led to her conversion. Surprisingly, the woman at the well is the first person in John's Gospel to whom Jesus reveals his identity as the Messiah. And her conversation with Jesus is the longest one on record anywhere in the New Testament. Jesus tells the Samaritan woman that he is living water, that those who drink of the living water will never be thirsty again. The living water will become a gushing spring within them. Intrigued, the woman wants to know more. She asks questions. She keeps talking with Jesus. Just as she goes deep in the well to get water, so her understanding goes deeper as she continues her conversation with Jesus. It's interesting that she, who likely has limited education and little or no religious training, is able to get under the surface of his words and delve into the deeper spiritual message behind them. Nicodemus, whose story we heard last week, who had the benefit of education and religious training, wasn't able to go deeper to understand what Jesus meant when he told him he needed to be born from above. He couldn't get beyond the literal meaning of Jesus' words. The Samaritan woman's curiosity led to conversion. She lived into her conversion with compassion. Immediately, she literally dropped everything, including her water jar, and ran back to the city. She had to share with the people there, the same people who likely had shunned her, the good news of the living water, the Messiah who was hanging out at Jacob's well. This unnamed woman is the first evangelist in John's Gospel. Last month, there was a house fire at my next-door neighbor's, a result of a broken pipe repair gone awry. No one was hurt, but their life has been unsettled ever since. As I stood with Kim in her driveway that morning, watching the firefighter pull out a window, pull out insulation from the walls, hose down the affected area, she said, "I'm so nervous that my mouth is completely dry." There wasn't much I could do, but I could offer some water. Thirst can come as a result of nervousness, fear, anxiety, feelings that come with our current circumstances. What are you thirsty for? I'm guessing it may be quite different from what you thought you might be thirsting for as Lent began 2.5 weeks ago. This Lent is a very different desert time from what I had imagined it might be. I had taken for granted my daily contact with other people, my weekly in-person conversations with you, my regular routine. Yet, there is unexpected gift in this unusual time. I have a heightened sense of what the 40 days in the wilderness might have been like for Jesus, being alone and apart from other people and usual activities. Certainly, there is extra time in this time for each of us to take time to be still with God, listening for God's leading in our lives. Perhaps our conversations with God will lead to a deepening of our faith in God and our trust in God. This time affords us an opportunity to connect with other people in different ways. There is time to write that note we've been meaning to write, to pick up the phone and talk with a friend, to connect with someone we've lost touch with. As Bishop Susan reminded us in her Zoom conference call with clergy on Wednesday, it's a time for us to discover how to be church while we can't gather in the church building, how to be the body of Christ while we aren't able to gather as a physical body. As we contemplate the story of the woman at the well, may it inspire us to go deeper in the well, knowing the living water is there for us to draw from. The living water is offered to quench our thirst, to ease our anxieties, to still our fears. Jesus invites us to come and drink from the well, and I invite you to be well, my friends.